Hi, so today we're going to be reading chapter 1 of Edward Tulane. This is one of my favorite books, and I always read it every single year in my classroom. And if you keep checking back and looking at the videos, hopefully we'll have every single chapter posted and we can read the book all together. So today we're just going to be reading chapter 1, but come back tomorrow and see if you can watch chapter 2. So this book is called The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, and it's by Katie DeMalco. Once, in a house on Egypt Street, there lived a rabbit who was made almost entirely out of china. He had china arms and china legs, china paws and china head, a china torso, and a china nose. China is just basically like glass. His arms and legs were jointed and joined by wire so that his china elbows and china knees could be bent, giving him so much freedom of movement. His ears were made of real rabbit fur, and beneath the fur there were strong, bendable wires, which allowed the ears to be arranged into poses that reflected the little rabbit's mood. Jaunty, tired, full of emotion. His tail, too, was made out of real rabbit fur and was fluffy and soft and very well shaped. The rabbit's name was Edward Tulane, and he was very tall. He measured almost 3 feet from the tip of his ears to the tip of his feet, and his eyes were painted in a penetrating and intellectual shade of blue. In all, Edward Tulane felt himself to be a very exceptional specimen. Only his whiskers gave him pause. They were long and elegant whiskers, as they should be, but they were of uncertain origin. Edward felt quite strongly that they were not whiskers of a rabbit. Whom the whiskers had once belonged to, intentionally, whatever animal, was a question that Edward could not bear to even consider for too long. And so the rabbit did not. He preferred, as a rule, to not think of unpleasant things. Edward's mistress was a 10-year-old dark-haired girl named Aloud Tulane, who thought almost as highly of Edward as Edward thought of himself. Each morning after she dressed herself from school, Aloud would dress Edward. The little china rabbit was in possession of an extraordinary wardrobe composed of handmade silk suits, custom shoes fashioned from the finest leather and designed specifically for his little rabbit feet, and a wide array of hats equipped with holes so that they could easily fit over Edward's large and expressive ears. Each pair of well-cut pants had a little small pocket for Edward's golden pocket watch. Adeline wound this watch for him every single morning. "Now, Edward," she would say to him after he was done winding the watch, "when the big hand is on the 12 and the little hand is on the 3, I will come home for you." She placed Edward on a chair in the dining room, and she positioned the chair so that Edward was looking out the window and could see the path that led up to the Tulane front door. Adeline balanced the watch on his left leg. She kissed the tips of his ears, and then she left, and Edward spent the next day staring out at Egypt Street, listening to the tick of his watch and waiting for her to return. Of all the seasons of the year, the rabbit most preferred winter, for the sun set early, and then the dining room windows became dark, and Edward could see his own reflection in the glass. And what a reflection he was! What an elegant figure he cut! Edward never ceased to be amazed at his own looks. In the evening, Edward sat at the dining room table with the other members of the Tulane family. Adeline, her mother and father, and Adeline's grandmother, who was called Pellegrina. True, Edward's ears barely came over the tabletop, and true also, he spent the entire duration of the meal staring straight ahead at nothing but the bright and blinding light of the tablecloth, but he was there, a little rabbit at the table. Adeline's parents found it very charming that Adeline considered Edward to be real, and that she sometimes requested that a phrase or story be repeated because little Edward had not heard it. "Papa," Adeline would say, "I'm afraid that Edward didn't quite catch that last bit." Adeline's father would turn in the direction of Edward's ears and speak very slowly, repeating what he had just said for the benefit of the little rabbit. Edward pretended, out of courtesy to Adeline, to listen, but in truth he was not very interested in what people had to say, and also he did not care for Adeline's parents and their condescending manner towards him. All adults, in fact, were condescending to him. Only Adeline's grandmother spoke to him as Adeline did, as one equal to another. Pellegrina was very old. She had a large, sharp nose and bright black eyes that shone like dark stars. It was Pellegrina who was responsible for Edward's existence. It was she who had commissioned his making, she who had ordered his silk suits and his pocket watch, his hats and his bendable ears, his fine leather shoes and his jointed arms and legs, all from a master craftsman in her native of France. It was Pellegrina who had given him a gift to Abilene on her 7th birthday. And it was Pellegrina who came to him each night to tuck Abilene into her bed and Edward into his. "Will you tell us a story, Pellegrina?" Abilene asked her. "Not tonight, little lady," said Pellegrina. "When?" said Abilene. "When will you tell us a story? What night?" "Soon," said Pellegrina. "Soon there will be a story to tell." And then she would turn off the light, and Edward and Abilene would lay in the dark of the bedroom. "I love you, Edward," Abilene said each night after Pellegrina had left. She said those words, and then she waited, almost as if she expected Edward to say something in return. Edward said nothing. He said nothing because, of course, he could not speak. He lay in his small bed next to Abilene's large one. He stared up at the ceiling, and he listened to the sound of her breathing, entering and leaving her body, knowing soon that she would be fast asleep. Because Edward's eyes were painted on and he could not close them, he was always awake. Sometimes if Abilene put him in his bed on his side instead of on his back, he could see through the cracks in the curtains and out into the dark night. On clear nights the stars shone, and their pin-prick light confronted Edward in a way that he could not quite understand. Often he stared at the stars all night until the dark finally gave way until dawn. So that's the end of the first chapter. Here's a little picture at the front of chapter 2. So be sure to check back tomorrow and listen to the second chapter.